To discuss all of it, we're going to be talking to Shane DeApril at the Hill newspaper in Washington. Shane, welcome to the program.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
So I'm interested here, Shane. Let's talk about the politics of this a little bit, because it certainly is looking right now that Barack Obama will get a short-term boost. Do you think this has any impact, though, for the long-term election 2012?
It really does remain to be seen, and I know that's sort of a cop-out answer. But
it is.
It's almost impossible to answer that question sort of sufficiently at the moment. I mean, there's no doubt that he gets a short-term bump. He gets... I've talked to pollsters this morning. They're predicting anywhere from 8 to 12 points is going to be a short-term approval bump, and that is. And when you think about that is a huge number. I mean, if you look at he's around 45, 46% right now. If he were to get a 10-point bump, that's 56%. That's pretty substantial. The million-dollar question is, how long does that last? And if history is any guide, no matter how momentous the occasion, whether it be the aftermath of the first Gulf War, the aftermath of September 11th, you've seen these types of surges in presidential approval. They don't last long term.
Right.
And they don't tend to impact the next election. We've seen that, over and over again. So there's a lot of questions right now, and I think the first one will be answered in about 2-3 days when we see just how large that approval bump is for Obama.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see a bump, and I agree with that. Is this because, and I always thought this was the reason whenever this sort of stuff was happening, there's always a good percentage, about 30% of the American public, that's paying attention to politics at any given time, like seriously addicted to politics, and that number might be even a little high. People haven't been really paying attention in recent weeks, probably as much as they had during the healthcare debate, during the summer of the Tea Party moments, where you had people going to town hall meetings and yelling back, fighting back with their congressman. There really wasn't that much focus on politics so far this year, but then this happens, everyone sort of turns around and says, wait, what just happened? And Obama's standing there and gets to take all the credit. Is that part of it, just because there's a lack of engagement on everything else?
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, and I think that's a really good point, because when you look at the reason why sort of big, earth-shattering national, international events create, poll surges, whether they be up or down, that's a large part of the reason, because, the general population is not tuned in, as you suggest, day to day on sort of the little developments, whether they be domestic politics or international politics, that, could move numbers. But when something momentous like this happens, that's not only a national news event, that is an absolutely worldwide news event, unlike one we've seen in a while.
Yes.
That very much contributes to the short-term movement.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm seeing now. Honestly, there is this, obviously there's going to be just a short surge. Now, I'm curious here, how does the GOP respond to this? I mean, John Boehner came out with a nice statement, not only, praising the soldiers who went in there and did this, but also praising President Obama to some degree. It was at the end of the statement, but still, he put it in there and said, thanks to President Obama for shepherding this through. How does the GOP respond to this? Can they point out the fact that some of this intelligence might have been gathered at Gitmo? Can they point out that, or is there really no political ground to run on here?
I'm not so sure. I mean, I think you are going to see certainly some of that, what you're suggesting in terms of going back to the Bush administration and some of the policies that President Obama has questioned, and say that some of those undoubtedly could have contributed to information on this capture and intelligence that forces used. Although I have to say, I don't necessarily think that hearkening back to George Bush in any way, shape, or form is something that's winning for the Republican Party on this. And I also don't think the Republican Party has to fight for this. I think that you mentioned Speaker Boehner's statement. I think that's the way Republicans handle this. They commend President Obama. They commend the United States military for a job well done. And I think you sort of move on, and you move on within the context that still the number one issue of the 2012 election is going to be the economy.
Right. It's not going to be national security or what because there's a lot of people who wrote on our Facebook fan page. They said, "Great, we got caught Bin Laden. Maybe he should stop socializing the economy." It's like let's turn right back to these key domestic issues. And I'm curious how progressives react to this, Shane, because that's another group that Barack Obama has not done too well with. He really hasn't.
Yeah.
He's been sort of hurting in the progressive, left-wing department. Are they going to flee? I know there were some pieces last week talking about Ralph Nader potentially coming in with a new candidate. Does this continue to hurt that cause? Because, I mean, we killed a guy. The way the story's being told is U.S. Navy guys shot a bullet through his face. I mean, that's about as graphic and as militaristic as it gets. And the U.S., while Barack Obama stood watching in the Situation Room in Washington, that's not something that progressives like. So what do you think?
Yeah, but I think the problem actually for President Obama with the left is less about how this whole thing went down and more about the fact that now folks on the left are going to throw up their hands and say, Mr. Obama, during the campaign, you said in speech after speech and debate after debate that we needed to turn back our focus to capturing or killing Osama bin Laden.
Right.
That was the objective. Well, that objective has now been achieved. So I would be very surprised if there is anybody on the left who does not say within the next couple of days to the White House, why the heck are we still there? You've achieved your objective. Now let's get every U.S. soldier out of Afghanistan. That's how progressives are going to feel. And this is actually, I think, going to sort of up the heat a little bit on the president from the left regarding the wars.
Absolutely. And lastly here, Shane, we're talking to Shane DeApril, reporter for the Hill newspaper in Washington. Lastly here, I'm curious, what do you think is the worst thing that Barack Obama could possibly do? I mean, is there a political move where he could just screw up royally, meaning he would just start, dancing the tarantella on the Truman balcony saying, look what I did, I'm the conquering. I don't know. What would be the worst thing politically? Maybe if he harped on this too much?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that I think so far what he's done. I mean, listen. I mean, some people have pointed to the statement last night saying, it sounded a little self-congratulatory and there's some criticism there. But again, I mean, I think that you probably get that from any president. I mean, this is the president of the United States who's captured or killed rather public enemy number one. I mean, I think it's a big deal under any circumstances,
Sure.
no matter who the president is, and let him take some credit. He will get some credit here certainly for this, and he should.
Yeah.
But I think your point about dwelling on it, I think probably is not good for either President Obama and the Democrats or the Republicans and the folks who hope to challenge him. I think that there's going to be a short-term bump from this, but honestly, I tell you, everybody I've spoken to on the left and the right today said this does not change the fundamental calculus of the 2012 election, which is the economy, unemployment, jobs. That's where it is even after this event.
Now, one more, Shane. Obviously, this is, for congressmen, for senators, people who are up for re-election this year. Is there a chance we're going to see at least one of those obscure Democrats we rarely ever talk about all of a sudden put up a video on YouTube doing an ad because, look, a Democrat president killed Osama bin Laden? Do you see that? Even on the fringes, do you believe that could have happened? That could happen.
Listen, I mean, I think anything is certainly possible. I mean, I think that we'll see how the anger, among the left of the Democratic Party sort of builds up and whether or not it builds up. I mean, like you mentioned before, you had Ralph Nader talking about a potential primary last week, and you've got people out there like Alan Grayson and, the Mike Gravells of the world. I mean, these people could sort of make a reappearance, and, I mean, there's definite anger at President Obama or directed at the president from the left, and I think we'll see it.
So you've got that anger, and then what about a moderate Democrat? This is my other last question. A moderate Democrat that would come out, they might be tied in their district. They're running against, a more right-wing candidate, and they have to move to the right a little bit. Would they come out and say, look, the Democrats are also the National Security Party, in addition to doing all the other stuff you like?
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good point, and I was talking about that exact thing with a pollster this morning, and suggested that for Democrats who are in centrist Democrats who are in areas where it's important to be a little more social conservative, conservative in terms of foreign policy, economically more conservative.
Right.
I think you're going to see these folks absolutely use this because you look at the gap on terrorism and national security has always favored the Republican Party, still favors the Republican Party. There are going to be a lot of Democrats who look at this event and see this as a way to potentially bridge that gap or close it a little bit, and I think you'll see centrist Democrats using that most of all.
Fascinating stuff. Shane DeApril of the Hill newspaper in Washington. Shane, thanks so much.